Have you ever watched someone's jaw drop as they discovered your hidden talent, igniting a flame of desire in their eyes that would change your life forever? When a young cleaning lady answered her phone in fluent Chinese, she never imagined the wealthy man watching her would be completely captivated by her brilliance and beauty. The vacuum cleaner's monotonous hum was the soundtrack to Mei Lin's thoughts as she worked her way methodically across the plush carpet of the executive office. 23 floors above Manhattan, the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view that still took her breath away, even after 6 months of cleaning this same office. Not that Mr. Davidson, the CEO of Davidson Enterprises, had ever noticed her appreciation of the skyline. To him, she was just another invisible service worker, part of the army of people who made his world function seamlessly without recognition. Mei Lin checked her watch, 6:30 p.m. She still had 3 more offices to clean before her shift ended at 8 RI. At least the executive floor was quiet at this hour, most of the high-powered executives having departed for dinner meetings or their luxury homes in the suburbs. She preferred the solitude. It allowed her to work efficiently without having to lower her gaze or press herself against the wall when important people walked by. She adjusted her earbuds and continued listening to her advanced Mandarin economics podcast. Few people knew that beneath the cleaner's uniform was a mind that had once been destined for greatness. Back in Beijing, she had been a rising academic star, with a full scholarship to study international finance. Then her father's sudden illness had derailed everything. The medical bills had consumed their modest savings, forcing Mei Lin to abandon her studies and seek work abroad. America had promised opportunity, but so far it had only delivered long hours, aching feet, and invisibility. The podcast discussed the intricacies of emerging market derivatives, complex concepts that Mei Lin not only understood but could debate with nuance. In another life, she might have been sitting behind one of these mahogany desks instead of cleaning them. The irony wasn't lost on her as she emptied another wastepaper basket filled with discarded reports that she could have written herself. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. The display showed her mother's face. The familiar crow's feet around her eyes deepened with worry even in the small digital image. Mei Lin pulled out her earbuds and answered in rapid Mandarin. "Mama? How is Baba today? Did the doctor change his medication?" She wedged the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued working, not wanting to fall behind schedule. Her mother's voice came through, tinged with the chronic fatigue of a caregiver. "The doctor says his heart is stable, but the new medicine costs more. I don't know how we'll manage next month." Mei Lin closed her eyes briefly, feeling the familiar weight settle on her shoulders. "I'll send extra in my next wire transfer. Don't worry about the money, Mama. Just make sure Baba takes his medicine exactly as prescribed." The conversation continued, Mei Lin's voice flowing in fluent Mandarin as she discussed medical terms, financial arrangements, and family matters with her mother. Her tone shifted between authoritative when discussing her father's treatment plan and gentle reassurance when her mother's voice trembled with worry. All the while she continued cleaning, her movements efficient and practiced. She didn't notice the office door opening behind her, didn't see the tall figure of Ethan Davidson, son of the CEO and the company's financial director, freeze in the doorway, his hand still on the door handle, his eyes widening as he listened to her conversation. "The cardiology specialist I researched has excellent reviews," Mei Lin continued, unaware of her audience. "I've analyzed his treatment approaches against the latest journal publications. His success rate with cases like Baba's is impressive. I've emailed you the details. Show them to Dr. Zhang tomorrow." Her mother protested about the cost, but Mei Lin cut her off gently. "This isn't optional, Mama. We need the best care available. I've worked out the financial projections for the next 6 months. We can afford this if I take on weekend shifts." Ethan remained motionless, mesmerized. The cleaning lady, whose name he didn't even know, was speaking rapid, flawless Mandarin with the confidence of a native speaker. But it wasn't just her language skills that held him transfixed. She was discussing complex medical treatments and financial projections with the expertise of someone with advanced education. As Mei Lin turned to move her cleaning cart, she finally spotted him. Her eyes widened in alarm and she quickly ended her call. "I'll call you back later, Mama. I love you." She pulled out her earbuds completely and lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize anyone was here. I'll come back later." Her English was careful, measured, with just enough accent to match the expectations of her role. Ethan found himself momentarily speechless. He'd glimpsed something extraordinary, a hidden depth in someone he'd previously overlooked entirely. Looking at her properly for the first time, he noticed her delicate features, the intelligence behind her dark eyes, the graceful way she held herself despite the unflattering uniform. "You speak Mandarin," he said finally, his voice reflecting his astonishment. Mei Lin hesitated, uncertain how to respond. Would he be angry that she was on a personal call during work hours? "Yes, sir. I'm from China." That was more than just conversational Mandarin, Ethan continued, stepping fully into the office and letting the door close behind him. "You were discussing cardiac specialists and financial projections." She straightened slightly, a flicker of pride momentarily overcoming her caution. "My father is ill. I was discussing his care with my mother." Ethan moved closer, his curiosity piqued. "Where did you learn to analyze medical research and financial projections?" Mei Lin's mind raced. She'd learned to downplay her education and intelligence in this job. People became uncomfortable when the woman emptying their trash could discuss economic theory. But something in Ethan's genuine interest made her answer honestly. "I was studying international finance at Beijing University before I came to America." She kept her voice neutral, as if this wasn't unusual. "I had to leave before completing my degree." Ethan's jaw literally dropped. The disconnect between her current position and her background was staggering. "You were at Beijing University? That's one of the top universities in China." "I had a full scholarship," she added, then immediately regretted it. She didn't want to sound like she was boasting or, worse, asking for pity. But Ethan wasn't pitying her. His mind was racing with possibilities. His company was expanding aggressively into Chinese markets, and they desperately needed people who understood both the language and the financial systems. They'd been flying in consultants at exorbitant rates, and still the cultural nuances escaped them. And here, right in front of him, was someone with exactly the expertise they needed, cleaning their offices for minimum wage. "Do you follow the Chinese markets?" he asked suddenly. Mei Lin's careful neutrality faltered, replaced by genuine enthusiasm. "Of course. The recent policy shifts have created fascinating ripples in the technology sector. The government's focus on domestic innovation has changed investment patterns significantly." Ethan gestured toward his father's desk. "May I show you something?" Hesitantly, Mei Lin followed him. On the desk lay a report, a market analysis for a potential new partnership with a Chinese tech company. Ethan pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. "Our analysts can't make sense of why this company's valuation jumped so dramatically in the third quarter. Their public financials don't explain it." Mei Lin studied the report for a moment, then smiled slightly. "That's because you're only seeing the official reports. This company has strong connections to the provincial government in Guangdong. There was an unannounced infrastructure initiative that directly benefits their technology. It's not public knowledge internationally, but it's been discussed in local business circles." Ethan stared at her, amazed. Their team of highly paid consultants had missed this entirely. "How do you know this?" "I follow several Chinese business forums and local news sources. Information doesn't always make it into the international press, but it's available if you know where to look." She spoke with quiet confidence, momentarily forgetting their respective positions. The moment stretched between them. Ethan seeing Mei Lin truly for the first time, reevaluating everything he thought he knew about her. The invisible cleaner was suddenly the most fascinating person he'd encountered in months. For her part, Mei Lin felt both the thrill of being recognized for her mind and the discomfort of stepping outside her prescribed role. She took a step back, reaching for her cleaning cart. "I should continue my work. I'm sorry for the interruption." "Wait," Ethan said quickly. "What's your name?" "Mei Lin Chen." "Mei Lin," he repeated, committing it to memory. "I'm Ethan Davidson." "I know who you are, Mr. Davidson." Of course she did. She cleaned his office 5 nights a week. "I have a proposition for you, Mei Lin." Ethan's voice had taken on the decisive tone he used for business decisions. "I'd like you to review this entire report and give me your analysis. I'll pay you consultant rates for your time." She blinked, surprised. "Sir, I'm not sure that would be appropriate. I'm employed by the cleaning service." "Consider it freelance work, completely separate from your current position." His mind was already racing ahead. "If your insights are as valuable as I suspect they'll be, this could be the beginning of something much more significant." Mei Lin hesitated. This could be the opportunity she'd been waiting for, a chance to use her education, to earn enough to truly help her family. But she'd learned to be cautious about opportunities that seemed too good to be true. "Why would you trust a cleaner with company information?" she asked directly. Ethan appreciated her candor. "I don't trust a cleaner. I trust a Beijing University finance student who can discuss cardiac research and market trends with equal facility." He held her gaze. "People contain multitudes, Mei Lin. Sometimes we just need someone to see beyond the surface." Something shifted in the air between them, an acknowledgement of seeing and being seen. For Mei Lin, it was the first time since arriving in America that someone had looked past her uniform to the person within. For Ethan, it was the dawning realization that he might have found not just a valuable business resource, but someone truly exceptional. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. Ethan nodded, reaching for his business card. "Take all the time you need, but when you're ready, call me directly." He handed her the card, their fingers brushing momentarily. "I have a feeling this could change everything, for both of us." As Mei Lin slipped the card into her pocket, neither of them could possibly know just how prophetic those words would prove to be. Mei Lin couldn't sleep that night. The business card Ethan Davidson had given her lay on her small bedside table, illuminated by the glow of her phone as she researched everything she could find about him. The more she read, the more her initial skepticism gave way to cautious hope. Ethan Davidson wasn't just the CEO's son. At 34, he had already established himself as the driving force behind the company's international expansion. Harvard Business School graduate, former Fulbright scholar. Profiles described him as brilliant but down-to-earth, innovative yet practical. Unlike many heirs to corporate fortunes, he'd worked his way through various departments, earning respect rather than expecting it. In her tiny apartment in Queens, shared with 2 other immigrant women she rarely saw due to their opposing work schedules, Mei Lin paced the worn linoleum floor. The proposition was tempting. Consultant rates would be substantially more than what she earned cleaning offices. But the risk was significant too. If her supervisors at the cleaning company found out, she could lose her job, and with it, her work visa. Her roommate Gabriela, a nurse from the Philippines, emerged from her bedroom for a night shift. She paused, noticing Mei Lin's distraction. "You look like you're solving world peace," she remarked, filling her travel mug with coffee. Mei Lin smiled wryly. "Just trying to decide if an opportunity is really an opportunity or a complication." "In my experience, they're usually both," Gabriela replied, her eyes tired but kind. "What's the opportunity?" Briefly, Mei Lin explained her encounter with Ethan Davidson. Gabriela whistled low. "Financial consulting for Davidson Enterprises? That's a big step up from floor cleaner." "It's just one report," Mei Lin cautioned, "and I'd still be cleaning floors. This would be extra." "Extra work? Extra money? Extra complications?" Gabriela nodded. "But also extra respect. Someone seeing the real you, that's worth something." She shouldered her bag. "We didn't come to America to stay invisible, Mei Lin." After Gabriella left, Mei Lin turned back to her laptop. She had already downloaded publicly available information about the Chinese company mentioned in the report. If she was going to do this, she would be thorough. By morning, she had made her decision. She would accept Ethan's offer, but on her terms. She would maintain clear boundaries and professional distance. This was strictly business, an opportunity to use her skills and earn much-needed money for her father's treatment. She called the number on the card during her lunch break the next day. "This is Ethan Davidson," his voice answered, sounding rushed. "Mr. Davidson, this is Mei Lin Chen. About your proposition?" "Mei Lin!" His tone immediately warmed, background noise suggesting he was moving to a quieter location. "I'm glad you called. Have you had a chance to consider my offer?" "I have," she replied carefully. "I'm willing to review the report and provide analysis under certain conditions." There was a pause, then a note of respect entered his voice. "Name your terms." "First, this must remain completely separate from my work with the cleaning service. I cannot risk my current employment." She took a deep breath. "Second, I'll need access to specific resources to properly analyze the data. And third, I would like a written agreement outlining exactly what you expect and what compensation I'll receive." "Absolutely reasonable," Ethan replied without hesitation. "I'll have my assistant prepare the paperwork. When can you start?" "I'm free Sunday afternoon." "Perfect. Shall we meet at my office? I can ensure you have a secure workspace and all the resources you need." Mei Lin hesitated. "Perhaps somewhere less conspicuous? I don't want to explain to security why I'm entering the building out of uniform on a weekend." "Of course." Ethan sounded slightly embarrassed for not considering this. "There's a private meeting room at the Wilson Hotel near the office. I'll book it for Sunday at 2 p.m. I'll text you the details." After they hung up, Mei Lin felt a curious mixture of excitement and trepidation. She was stepping into unknown territory, crossing a boundary between worlds. But for the first time since arriving in America, she felt a spark of the academic passion that had once defined her. Sunday arrived, and Mei Lin found herself standing outside the Wilson Hotel, a boutique establishment that catered to business travelers. She had dressed carefully in her most professional outfit, a navy pantsuit she'd purchased second-hand but meticulously tailored herself. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, her makeup subtle but polished. She looked like the finance professional she had once trained to be, not the office cleaner she had become. The concierge directed her to a private meeting room on the mezzanine level. When she entered, Ethan was already there, surrounded by documents and 2 laptops. He looked up and momentarily froze, clearly struck by her transformation. "Mei Lin?" he said, standing. "I almost didn't recognize you." She smiled slightly. "The uniform does tend to make people invisible." "That's not what I meant," he replied quickly. "You look completely in your element." "This was my element once," she said simply, placing her laptop bag on the table. "Shall we begin?" For the next 3 hours, they worked through the report. Mei Lin's insights were incisive and comprehensive. She identified cultural nuances the Western analysts had missed, explained government policies that affected market conditions, and pointed out several potential risks that hadn't been considered. Ethan watched her with growing admiration. Her expertise was evident, but it was her analytical process that truly impressed him. She approached problems systematically yet creatively, considering angles that wouldn't occur to someone without her unique perspective. "This partnership projection is overly optimistic," she explained, pointing to a graph. "Chinese businesses, especially those with government connections, operate on relationship networks, guanxi, that take years to build. Your company is underestimating the time investment required before seeing substantial returns." Ethan made notes rapidly. "So you would recommend a more gradual approach. Begin with smaller collaborative projects to build trust and demonstrate commitment to the Chinese market. Also, your team structure needs adjustment. The hierarchy outlined here doesn't align with Chinese business expectations." By late afternoon, Ethan had filled a notebook with her observations and recommendations. When they finally paused, he leaned back in his chair, studying her with undisguised appreciation. "You realize you've just saved us from at least 3 major strategic errors," he said. "Our consultants missed all of this." Mei Lin shrugged slightly. "Your consultants probably have impressive credentials but limited practical understanding of how business actually functions in China. It's not something you can learn entirely from reports and data." "And you understand it instinctively," Ethan observed. "Not instinctively. I grew up in it. My father was an economics professor before his illness. Our dinner conversations were about market trends and government policies." A shadow crossed her face. That world seems very distant now. The mention of her father reminded Ethan of her personal situation. "How is your father doing? You mentioned he needs specialized care." Mei Lin tensed slightly, uncomfortable mixing personal matters with their professional interaction. "He's stable, but the prognosis is uncertain. The medical expenses are challenging." Ethan nodded, recognizing her reluctance to elaborate. He reached for a folder and slid it across the table. "This is the consultant agreement we discussed. The fee is what we typically pay for expert analysis of this nature." She opened the folder and couldn't hide her surprise at the figure, more than she earned in 2 months of cleaning. "This seems excessive for a few hours of work." "It's completely standard for the level of expertise you've provided," Ethan insisted. "Actually, considering the value of the insights, it's rather modest." Mei Lin studied the agreement carefully before signing. The money would cover her father's specialist visits for several months. As she handed back the signed document, their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected current through her. "I have another proposition," Ethan said, maintaining eye contact. "We're putting together a special team for our China expansion initiative. We need someone who understands both cultures, both languages, both financial systems, someone exactly like you." Her heart rate quickened. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm suggesting a possibility," he clarified. "It would require some arranging, visa considerations for one thing, but if you're interested, I believe we could create a position that would utilize your true capabilities." The offer hung in the air between them, tantalizing, life-changing, terrifying. Mei Lin felt herself at a crossroads. The practical side of her warned about getting her hopes up. The ambitious side that had been dormant for so long surged with renewed energy. "I would need to consider it carefully," she said finally. "Of course." Ethan's gaze remained steady. "But consider this too. You're extraordinary, Mei Lin. Not just your knowledge or your analysis, but your perseverance. Walking into an executive's office to clean when you have the mind to run the company, that takes remarkable strength of character." His words, spoken with genuine admiration rather than pity, touched something deep inside her. For months, she'd been forcing herself to become smaller, less visible, adjusting to a life far below her capabilities. Having someone, especially someone like Ethan Davidson, see and acknowledge her true self was unexpectedly emotional. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said, her voice slightly unsteady as she gathered her things. "I'll think about your offer." As she stood to leave, Ethan rose as well. "Regardless of what you decide about the position, I'd like your input on the next phase of this project. Would you be willing to continue as a consultant in the meantime?" Mei Lin nodded, allowing herself a small smile. "I would like that." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, an unspoken recognition passing between them. They both felt it, the beginning of something significant, a connection that transcended their vastly different circumstances. "I'll be in touch this week," Ethan said, walking her to the door. As Mei Lin left the hotel, stepping into the fading afternoon light, she felt lighter than she had in months. She had entered that meeting room as a cleaning lady moonlighting as a consultant. She had left as herself, Mei Lin Chen, finance expert, valued for her mind rather than her labor. Whatever came next, that transformation alone was priceless. The following weeks transformed Mei Lin's life into a carefully orchestrated balancing act. By day, she continued her cleaning duties, moving invisibly through the offices of Davidson Enterprises. By night and during weekends, she analyzed market reports, translated documents, and provided cultural insights as a consultant for Ethan's China expansion team. The dichotomy was surreal. In one room, executives would barely acknowledge her presence as she emptied their trash bins. Hours later, in confidential meeting rooms at the Wilson Hotel, those same executives would lean forward eagerly as she explained the intricacies of Chinese regional business practices, never recognizing her as the woman who cleaned their offices. Only Ethan knew her secret, and he honored her request to keep her dual roles separate. When they occasionally crossed paths during her cleaning shifts, he maintained a polite, impersonal distance, though she sometimes caught him watching her with a mixture of amusement and admiration at her performance. Tonight, Mei Lin pushed her cleaning cart past the conference room where she'd presented a market analysis just that morning. Through the glass, she could see her presentation still displayed on the screen, executives' coffee cups abandoned around the table. She allowed herself a small, private smile as she continued down the hallway. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a message from Ethan. "Board very impressed with your analysis. They've approved Phase 1 of the expansion plan based on your recommendations. Celebration dinner tomorrow?" Mei Lin paused, her finger hovering over the screen. Their professional relationship had remained strictly that, professional. But there had been moments, lingering glances, conversations that drifted beyond business into philosophy and literature, a growing ease in each other's company. She sensed a line blurring, one she wasn't sure she should cross. "Thank you for the update. Glad to hear about the board's approval," she typed, then hesitated before adding, "Rain check on dinner? Working on the cultural sensitivity training module for your team?" His response came quickly. "All work and no celebration makes for a dull expansion. The module can wait until Monday, 7 p.m., Golden Dynasty in Chinatown. Consider it a working dinner if you must." She smiled despite herself. Golden Dynasty was an excellent choice, authentic enough to impress someone Chinese but comfortable for Western diners too. Ethan was nothing if not thoughtful. "Very well. Working dinner at 7, she replied, then tucked her phone away as her supervisor rounded the corner. "Chen, break time's over. 14th floor needs attention. Someone spilled coffee all over the Hansworth account files." "Yes, Mrs. Reeves, right away." Mei Lin pushed her cart toward the elevator, her mind already splitting between the mundane cleanup ahead and the complex financial models she needed to refine before tomorrow's dinner. The next evening, Mei Lin arrived at Golden Dynasty 15 minutes early, wanting to compose herself before Ethan arrived. She had changed from her university sweatshirt and jeans, her weekend research uniform, into a simple but elegant emerald silk dress that she'd brought from China. It was one of the few beautiful things she'd allowed herself to keep when packing for America, a reminder of who she had been. The maitre d' led her to a private dining alcove toward the back, partially screened by carved wooden panels. To her surprise, an elderly Chinese woman sat at the table, arranging teacups with practiced precision. The woman looked up and smiled, addressing Mei Lin in Mandarin. "Ah, you must be Mei Lin. I am Li Ai. Ethan asked me to ensure everything is perfect tonight." Mei Lin responded in kind, her formal Mandarin flowing easily. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Auntie Li. You've known Ethan long?" "Since he was a boy with scraped knees, asking endless questions about my dumplings," Li Ai chuckled. "His father brought him here after his mother died. I taught him his first Mandarin words while feeding him soup to cure his broken heart." This unexpected glimpse into Ethan's past intrigued Mei Lin. He rarely spoke of his mother or childhood, focusing conversations on the present and future. "I didn't realize his mother had passed away when he was young," she said softly. Li Yi nodded, her eyes growing distant. "Cancer took her when he was 8. It changed something fundamental in both Davidson men, but differently. The father buried himself in work, building his empire higher. The son, she paused, considering. The son began looking beyond walls, beyond borders, always searching. Before Mei Lin could ask more, Ethan appeared at the entrance to their alcove. He wore no tie with his charcoal suit, giving him a more relaxed appearance than his office persona. His face brightened visibly when he saw Mei Lin. "You're here already, and I see you've met Li Ayi," he said, bending to accept the woman's affectionate pat on his cheek. "I was telling her you were a troublesome child who asked too many questions," Li Ayi teased, rising from the table. "I've ordered your favorites, plus specialties from Sichuan that might remind Miss Chen of home." After she departed, Ethan sat across from Mei Lin, his eyes taking in her appearance with undisguised appreciation. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly self-conscious. "Li Ayi is wonderful. She seems to care for you very much." "She's been a constant in my life when there weren't many," Ethan acknowledged. "My father and I came here after every school event my mother missed. Eventually it became our tradition. Later, when I became interested in international business, Li Ayi was my first Mandarin teacher." The conversation flowed easily as servers brought a succession of dishes: delicate dumplings, fragrant fish steamed with ginger and scallions, crispy duck with plum sauce. Mei Lin found herself relaxing, enjoying the familiar flavors of home and Ethan's genuine interest in her observations about everything from Chinese poetry to cryptocurrency regulations. "The board wants to accelerate our timeline based on your analysis," Ethan said as they lingered over jasmine tea. "They're impressed with your understanding of both markets. Several members asked where we'd found you." Mei Lin tensed slightly. "What did you tell them?" "That you were a consultant who preferred to remain behind the scenes for now." He studied her expression. "It raises an important question, though. How long do you plan to continue your dual career?" She traced the rim of her teacup, considering. "The consulting fees have helped tremendously with my father's medical expenses. But my work visa is tied to the cleaning service. Changing that arrangement isn't simple." "Actually," Ethan leaned forward, his expression earnest, "I've been exploring options. Davidson Enterprises could sponsor a specialized work visa. Our legal team is confident we could make a case based on your unique expertise." The possibility hung in the air between them, a legitimate path to the professional life she'd been trained for, an escape from the limbo she'd been living in. "That's very generous," she said carefully, "but I need to consider all implications. My family depends on my income being steady and reliable." "I understand. Just know the option exists when you're ready." Ethan hesitated, then reached across the table, his hand covering hers briefly. "You're too extraordinary to spend your life invisible, Mei Lin." The warmth of his touch lingered after he withdrew his hand. Something shifted in the atmosphere between them. Professional admiration deepening into a more personal connection neither was quite ready to name. Their conversation drifted to lighter topics as dessert arrived: delicate red bean pastries and sweet rice dumplings in ginger syrup. Mei Lin found herself sharing stories of her childhood in Beijing, of her ambitious mother who had pushed her to excel, of the professor father whose brilliant mind was now increasingly clouded by illness. "He sounds remarkable," Ethan said. "You speak of him with such pride. He's the reason I understand economics so intuitively. Our home was filled with books and ideas. Even when we had little money, we were rich in knowledge." Her expression clouded. "It breaks my heart that his mind is failing while I'm so far away." Ethan regarded her thoughtfully. "Have you considered bringing him here for treatment? There are excellent cardiac specialists in New York." "The cost would be impossible," she said with a small shake of her head. "Even with the consulting fees, international medical care is beyond my reach." "Perhaps not," Ethan began, but Mei Lin's phone interrupted them, vibrating urgently on the table. She glanced at the screen and paled. "It's my mother. She never calls this late in China unless—" She answered quickly, speaking rapid Mandarin, her expression growing increasingly distressed. When she ended the call, her hands were trembling. "My father has had another episode. They've taken him to the hospital. The doctors are saying he needs surgery soon, or—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "You need to go to him," Ethan said immediately. "I can't. The cost of last-minute international tickets, plus taking time off work, I'd lose my position, my visa." The careful balance of her life was collapsing around her. "And the surgery they're recommending, it's more than I've saved, even with the consulting work." Ethan reached a decision in that moment, though he was careful not to overwhelm her with it immediately. "First things first, let me drive you home so you can pack. You're going to China." "Ethan, I just explained. The company jet is leaving for Beijing tomorrow morning for a series of executive meetings. There's room for one more passenger." His tone was gentle but firm. "As for your job, you've been providing essential consulting services to Davidson Enterprises. This is simply an emergency international assignment. And my visa? We'll have legal handle the details. Your absence from the cleaning service will be covered by appropriate documentation." Mei Lin stared at him, overwhelmed by the swift, decisive way he was rearranging reality to help her. "Why would you do all this?" For a moment, Ethan's carefully maintained professional demeanor slipped, revealing something deeper in his eyes. "Because you would do the same for someone you respected, if you had the means." The pause before respected was brief but telling. They both felt the word that might have been spoken instead. "I'll pay you back," she insisted. "Every cent. We'll discuss terms later," he said, already signaling for the check. "Right now, we need to get you ready for Beijing." As they left the restaurant, Li Yi watched them from the kitchen doorway, noting how Ethan's hand rested lightly at the small of Mei Lin's back, how the young woman leaned almost imperceptibly toward him despite her obvious distress. The old woman nodded to herself with satisfaction. She had seen enough beginnings in her long life to recognize one when it appeared before her. The Davidson Enterprises private jet gleamed in the early morning light, its sleek form a stark contrast to the commercial airliners lumbering across the tarmac at JFK. Mei Lin hesitated at the foot of the stairs, clutching her hastily packed suitcase. This world of private aviation and frictionless travel was so far removed from her normal experience that it felt almost like trespassing. "Ms. Chen?" The flight attendant at the top of the stairs smiled professionally. "We're ready for departure whenever you're settled." With a deep breath, Mei Lin ascended into a realm of luxury she had only glimpsed in magazines. The cabin's leather seats, polished wood surfaces, and understated elegance spoke of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Two Davidson executives nodded politely from the front section, already absorbed in their tablets and documents. Ethan had arranged everything with astonishing efficiency. In less than 12 hours, he had secured her seat on the company jet, arranged for a medical leave of absence from the cleaning service, with full pay somehow, and provided her with an international consultant identification package that would explain her presence to both Chinese authorities and the Davidson executives traveling with her. She had barely slept, alternating between anxious calls to her mother for updates on her father's condition and stunned contemplation of how rapidly her circumstances had changed. The cleaning company supervisor, who had barely remembered her name, had suddenly become solicitous, assuring her that her position would be waiting upon her return. The Davidson legal department had expedited documentation confirming her status as a valued consultant, and Ethan himself had remained by her side until nearly midnight, making calls, arranging details, and ensuring she had everything she needed. Only as the jet taxied toward the runway did Mei Lin allow herself to fully process what was happening. She was flying to Beijing on a private jet to see her dying father, courtesy of a man who, weeks earlier, hadn't noticed her existence. The improbability of it all made her dizzy. "Would you like something to drink before takeoff, Ms. Chen?" the attendant asked. "Just water, thank you," she replied, conscious of the executives pretending not to observe this newcomer in their rarefied atmosphere. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Mei Lin closed her eyes, feeling the familiar surge of takeoff pressing her into the buttery leather seat. She was going home, but she was no longer the same person who had left. 14 hours later, Beijing materialized beneath them, its sprawling expanse both achingly familiar and strangely altered. The city of her birth and education had continued evolving in her absence, new skyscrapers punctuating the skyline where there had been none before. Customs was expedited thanks to her Davidson Enterprises credentials, another surreal moment in a journey full of them. Outside in the arrival hall, her mother waited, her small frame seeming to have shrunk further since Mei Lin had last seen her. When their eyes met, both women moved quickly through the crowd, embracing with the desperate relief of family reunited in crisis. "Mama," Mei Lin whispered, inhaling the familiar scent of jasmine that her mother had always worn. "How is Baba?" "Stable for now," her mother replied, her voice trembling slightly. "The doctors say the surgery cannot wait more than a few days. But how are you here? The expense—" "I'll explain everything," Mei Lin assured her, guiding her mother toward the exit. "Let's go to the hospital first." The taxi ride through Beijing's congested streets was a journey through memories. They passed Mei Lin's former university, the park where she had studied for exams, the noodle shop where she had celebrated her scholarship. Each landmark echoed with the life she had abandoned when duty called her across the ocean. Her mother filled the drive with updates on neighbors and distant relatives, carefully avoiding deeper questions about Mei Lin's sudden appearance or the means that had made it possible. There would be time for explanations later. Now, there was only the urgency of reaching the hospital. Beijing Central Hospital loomed before them, its modern glass facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. Mei Lin steeled herself as they entered, knowing that the father she would find inside might bear little resemblance to the vibrant intellectual who had shaped her mind and ambitions. They found him in a private room, an extravagance Mei Lin had insisted upon funding when he was first hospitalized. Chen Liang lay against white pillows, his once robust frame diminished, his scholar's hands now thin and mapped with prominent veins. But when he opened his eyes and saw his daughter, they still held the keen intelligence she remembered. "My little phoenix," he said, using the childhood nickname that had always made her simultaneously embarrassed and proud. "You've flown home." Mei Lin moved to his bedside, taking his hand carefully between hers. "Of course I came, Baba. How could I stay away?" For the next hour, they talked as if the ocean between them had never existed, as if his health were merely an inconvenience rather than a looming crisis. He asked about America, about her work. She spoke only of the consulting, not the cleaning, about the books she was reading and the ideas she was exploring. Even weakened, his mind remained sharp, questioning her economic theories and challenging her assumptions with the same intellectual rigor he had applied when she was his student. When he tired, drifting into sleep mid-sentence as the medication took effect, Mei Lin and her mother retreated to the hallway. "The specialists will meet with us tomorrow morning," her mother said, leading her toward the cafeteria. "They want to discuss the surgical options." "And the costs?" Mei Lin asked quietly. Her mother's expression tightened. "They're substantial. Even with your generous support these past months, we've had to borrow from relatives. The kind of surgery he needs—" She didn't finish the thought. Mei Lin squeezed her mother's hand. "Don't worry about the money, Mama. I can cover the expenses." Her mother looked at her sharply, maternal instinct detecting the unspoken story behind such a statement. "Mei Lin, what aren't you telling me? You work as a cleaner in America. How could you possibly afford specialized cardiac surgery?" Finding a quiet corner of the nearly empty cafeteria, Mei Lin explained her dual role at Davidson Enterprises, the consulting work, and finally, Ethan's intervention that had made her journey possible. She carefully framed it as a business arrangement, valuable services exchanged for appropriate compensation and professional courtesy. Her mother listened with growing concern. "This man, this Ethan Davidson, he has done all this for you? Arranged private jets and medical leave? And what does he expect in return?" "It's not like that, Mama," Mei Lin protested, though she understood her mother's suspicion. In their experience, powerful men rarely extended help without expecting something in return. "He values my expertise. The company genuinely needs my insights for their expansion into China. Men like that don't arrange private jets for employees they merely value professionally," her mother observed shrewdly. Before Mei Lin could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal the confusion of her own feelings, her phone vibrated with a message. It was Ethan. "Landed safely? How is your father?" Such a simple question, yet the timing of it, perfectly aligned with when she would have reached the hospital, accounting for travel time from the airport, suggested he had been tracking her journey, mentally accompanying her every step of the way. "Safely arrived. Father stable but surgery urgent. Meeting with specialists tomorrow morning," she typed back. His response came quickly. "Whatever the doctors recommend, tell them to proceed with the best possible care. All expenses covered. I've arranged with Beijing United Family Hospital to transfer him if better facilities needed. Local Davidson office standing by to assist." Mei Lin stared at the message, overwhelmed by its implications. Her mother, reading over her shoulder, raised her eyebrows significantly. "Just business, she murmured. "It's complicated," Mei Lin admitted, finally acknowledging what she had been evading even in her own thoughts. "Life usually is," her mother replied, patting her hand. "But I raised you to recognize the difference between exploitation and genuine care. This man's actions speak of the latter." That night, in her childhood bedroom preserved exactly as she had left it, academic awards still lined the walls, textbooks still filled the shelves, Mei Lin lay awake, staring at the familiar ceiling. The distance between her former life and her current reality seemed simultaneously vast and paper-thin. Her phone illuminated with another message from Ethan. "Try to rest. Everything at work is handled. Your only job right now is to be with your family." She found herself typing before she could overthink. "Why are you doing all this, really?" There was a long pause before his response appeared. "Because I can. Because you would do the same if our positions were reversed. Because seeing someone of your caliber scrubbing floors while hiding her brilliance felt like watching a crime in progress." Before she could respond, another message followed. "And because from the moment I heard you speaking Mandarin in my father's office, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Get some sleep, Mei Lin. Tomorrow will be challenging enough." The simple honesty of his words, sent across thousands of miles in the middle of his night and her morning, pierced through the careful barriers she had constructed around her heart since leaving China. For months, she had focused solely on survival, her father's and her own. She had suppressed any thought of personal happiness or connection as an unaffordable luxury. Yet here was this man, this privileged son of wealth and power, who had seen her, truly seen her, when she was trying her hardest to be invisible, who had recognized her value when she herself had been forced to discount it, who now was moving heaven and earth to help her family without being asked. As dawn broke over Beijing, casting her childhood room in golden light, Mei Lin made a decision. Whatever came next, with her father's health, with her career, with Ethan, she would face it as her true self, not as the diminished version circumstances had forced her to become. She had left China as a desperate daughter seeking means to save her father. She would return to America as Mei Lin Chen in full, brilliant, capable, and finally ready to acknowledge the feelings taking root in her heart. Morning arrived with the familiar Beijing symphony, bicycle bells, street vendors' calls, and the distant hum of traffic already congesting the main arteries of the city. Mei Lin prepared for the meeting with her father's specialists with meticulous care, selecting a conservative navy dress and jacket that projected both respect and authority. In America, she had learned how easily people dismissed those who didn't appear to belong in rooms where decisions were made. Her mother watched her preparation with knowing eyes. "You look like a business executive, not a daughter." "Today, I need to be both," Mei-Lin replied, securing her hair in a neat chignon. Doctors listen differently to people they perceive as important. They arrived at the hospital to find an unexpected scene. The head cardiologist, Dr. Zhang, who had previously been brusque and hurried during their interactions, waited for them at the nurses' station with 2 colleagues. His demeanor had transformed overnight. Now he was solicitous, almost deferential. "Ms. Chen, we've been expecting you," he said, bowing slightly. "The consultation room is prepared, and we've assembled the complete team to discuss your father's case." Mei-Lin exchanged a glance with her mother, who looked equally bewildered by this change in treatment. As they followed Dr. Zhang down the corridor, he continued speaking with newfound respect. "We received the call from Davidson Enterprises' Beijing office this morning. Their medical liaison has assured us that all financial considerations are resolved, which allows us to focus entirely on providing optimal care for Professor Chen." The consultation room contained not just the 3 specialists she had expected, but a full team of 7 medical professionals, including a renowned cardiac surgeon Mei-Lin recognized from medical journal articles she had researched during her father's initial diagnosis. "Dr. Lin," she said, unable to hide her surprise, "I didn't realize you would be consulting on my father's case." The distinguished surgeon nodded. "Davidson Enterprises contacted my office yesterday. I reviewed Professor Chen's files last night and believe I can offer some perspective." For the next hour, the medical team presented a comprehensive assessment of her father's condition. The proposed surgery was complex but promising, a specialized valve replacement technique developed in Switzerland that Dr. Lin had pioneered in China. Without financial constraints, they recommended proceeding within the week, with preoperative preparations beginning immediately. Under normal circumstances, the waiting list for this procedure would be several months, Dr. Zhang explained. But given the urgent nature of Professor Chen's condition and the special interest in his case, we've expedited the schedule. Mei-Lin understood the unspoken reality. Money and influence had cleared obstacles that would have remained insurmountable for an ordinary retired professor and his family. The fact that it was Ethan's influence rather than her own made the situation both miraculous and unsettling. "When can I speak with my father about these options?" she asked. "He's being prepared for additional tests now," Dr. Lin replied. "You should be able to discuss everything with him this afternoon. In the meantime, Ms. Chen, perhaps you could accompany me to my office. There are some specific aspects of the procedure I'd like to explain in detail." As they walked through the hospital corridors, Dr. Lin's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Your father was my professor many years ago. His lectures on economic theory shaped my understanding of resource allocation in medicine. It's an honor to be able to help him now." The personal connection surprised Mei-Lin. "I had no idea. Many of us who studied under him have gone on to different fields, but we carry his influence with us." He gave her a sidelong glance. "When the Davidson representative mentioned your name, I made the connection immediately. You're following in his footsteps, I understand. International finance?" "I was," she acknowledged, uncomfortable with the assumption that she had achieved the academic success her father had envisioned for her. "My path took a different turn when he became ill." Dr. Lin nodded sympathetically. "Life often intervenes in our plans, but perhaps this situation will allow you to resume your intended journey." In his office, alongside detailed explanations of the surgical procedure, Dr. Lin shared stories about her father as a young professor. His intellectual rigor, his kindness to struggling students, his unwavering ethical standards. It was a portrait of the man she had always known, but painted from a different angle, helping her see her father through the eyes of those he had influenced. When she finally returned to her father's room, she found him sitting up, looking more alert than the previous day. Her mother had brought his favorite tea in a thermos, and the familiar scent of jasmine and oolong filled the sterile hospital room with homey comfort. "The doctors tell me I'm to be Dr. Lin's special project," her father said, his eyes twinkling with his old humor. "Apparently, having a daughter with connections has its advantages." "I can explain," Maylene began, but her father waved her off. "Your mother has told me about your American patron, this Davidson heir who has taken such interest in your talents." The slight emphasis on the final word carried a father's protective concern. "It's not what you're thinking, Baba," she said, feeling like a teenager again under his perceptive gaze. "Ethan, Mr. Davidson, recognized my financial expertise. The company values my insights on Chinese markets." Her father sipped his tea thoughtfully. "And this company regularly sends its cleaning consultants across the world on private jets? Arranges for renowned surgeons to clear their schedules for the parents of employees?" Maylin sighed. There was no point trying to maintain the fiction of a purely professional relationship with her father, whose ability to read human motivations had made him a formidable economist. "It's complicated," she admitted. "But Ethan is a good man. He saw potential in me when I was invisible to everyone else." Her father's expression softened. "I have no doubt about your potential, my phoenix. I'm more concerned about this man's intentions. Power imbalances can be problematic." "I'm aware of that," Maylin assured him. "I've been careful." "Not too careful, I hope," her mother interjected, having listened silently until now. "Sometimes walls built for protection become prisons of our own making." Before Maylin could respond to this unexpected philosophical turn from her practical mother, her phone chimed with an incoming video call. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. "I should take this," she said, stepping toward the door. "No, stay," her father insisted. "I'm curious to meet this American benefactor of ours." With a mixture of nervousness and resignation, Maylin accepted the call. Ethan's face appeared, slightly disheveled, his background suggesting he was in his office despite the late hour in New York. "Maylin, sorry to call so late. I wanted to check if you'd met with the medical team yet." His concern was evident even through the small screen. "Yes, we just finished the consultation," she replied, switching to English. "The surgery is scheduled for next week. Dr. Lin, who apparently was once my father's student, will be performing the procedure himself." "That's excellent news." Relief flooded his features. "Is there anything else you need? The Beijing office is fully at your disposal." Maylin hesitated, then turned the phone so her parents were visible. "Ethan, I'd like you to meet my parents, Chen Liang and Chen Wei." Surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by a warm smile. Without missing a beat, he addressed them in careful, accented Mandarin. "Professor Chen, Mrs. Chen, it's an honor to meet you. I've heard so much about you from your daughter." Her father, despite his initial skepticism, responded with equal politeness. "Mr. Davidson, we are deeply grateful for your assistance. Though I admit, your generosity toward a junior employee is rather extraordinary." Ethan's eyes met Maylin's briefly through the screen before he answered. "Your daughter is far from an ordinary employee, Professor. Her insights have already saved our company from several costly missteps in our China strategy. My father has personally remarked on the value of her contributions." The conversation continued for several minutes, Ethan displaying a cultural sensitivity that impressed even Maylin's father. He asked thoughtful questions about the professor's research, demonstrating familiarity with his published works that could only have come from recent, intensive study. By the time they ended the call, her father was looking at her with newfound understanding. "He researched my academic papers," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. "Not many young American businessmen would bother." "He's not like most people," Maylin agreed quietly. Her mother patted her hand. "Neither are you, daughter. Perhaps that's why you found each other across such different worlds." The next 5 days passed in a whirlwind of preoperative preparations, tests, and consultations. Mei Lin divided her time between the hospital and remote work for Davidson Enterprises, analyzing reports and participating in video conferences from her childhood bedroom, now transformed into an impromptu office. Ethan checked in daily, their conversations evolving from medical updates to deeper exchanges. Late at night in Beijing, early morning in New York, they would talk about books they loved, childhood memories, dreams deferred. The distance somehow made it easier to lower their guards, to speak truths they might have kept hidden face to face. "I never told anyone this," Ethan confessed during one late-night call, "but I originally went to college for literature, not business. I wanted to be a writer." "What happened?" Mei Lin asked, curled in the window seat of her bedroom, watching Beijing's lights shimmer below. "Reality," he said simply. "My father had a heart attack my sophomore year. Suddenly, the company's future and the livelihoods of thousands of employees seemed to rest on my shoulders. I transferred to business school the next semester." "Do you regret it?" He considered the question seriously. "I regret the circumstances, not the choice. Some responsibilities can't be declined once you recognize them." His eyes found hers through the screen. "You understand that better than most." She nodded, recognizing the parallel to her own life's detour. "We both set aside one path to walk another out of duty. The difference is, I've found purpose in the path I didn't choose," Ethan said. "Have you?" The question lingered with her long after they'd said goodnight. Had she found purpose in her detour? Or had she merely been surviving, waiting for life to resume once her father recovered? The day before the surgery, Mei Lin sat beside her father's bed, reading aloud from his favorite Tang Dynasty poems. The familiar cadence of the ancient verses soothed them both, creating a bubble of calm before the next day's ordeal. "Mei Lin," her father said during a pause between poems, "whatever happens tomorrow, you must promise me something." "Don't talk like that, Baba. Dr. Lin says the procedure has an excellent success rate." "Nevertheless," he took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Promise me you won't bury your gifts any longer. The daughter I raised was meant to shape economies, not clean offices. Your sacrifice has been honorable, but it must not be permanent." Tears welled in her eyes. "I promise." Her father nodded, satisfied. "And this young man, this Ethan, he sees your value clearly. That is rare and precious, when someone truly sees us as we are." "Yes," she whispered, finally allowing herself to acknowledge the truth. "It is." The day of her father's surgery dawned clear and bright, the Beijing sky an unclouded blue that seemed like a good omen. Mei Lin arrived at the hospital before sunrise, determined to see her father before they took him to pre-op. Her mother joined her an hour later, bringing freshly made dumplings that had always been her husband's favorite, a small ritual of normalcy amid the sterile hospital environment. "For after the surgery," she said, placing the container in the small refrigerator in the hospital room, "he'll need his strength to recover." The hours of waiting stretched interminably. Mei Lin and her mother took turns pacing the family consultation room, clutching cups of cooling tea, exchanging reassuring words neither fully believed. Though Dr. Lin had explained every step of the procedure, had quoted encouraging success rates and detailed recovery timelines, the reality of her father's chest being opened, his damaged heart temporarily stopped, filled Mei Lin with a dread that no statistics could alleviate. Halfway through the 6-hour procedure, her phone vibrated with a message from Ethan. "Thinking of you and your family today. I've asked the Beijing office to send updates to me every hour. You're not alone in this waiting." The simple acknowledgement of the day's emotional weight brought unexpected tears to her eyes. For so long she had carried her burdens in isolation, maintaining a careful facade of competence and control. Having someone who understood, who didn't require explanations or justifications, felt like finally setting down a heavy load she hadn't realized she was still carrying. "Good news?" her mother asked, noticing her expression. "Just Ethan checking in," Mei Lin replied, quickly wiping away the moisture from her cheeks. Her mother nodded knowingly. "He cares deeply for you." "It's not that simple, Mama." "Isn't it?" Her mother's gaze was direct. "The most important things rarely are simple, but that doesn't make them untrue." Before Mei Lin could formulate a response, Dr. Lin appeared at the doorway, still in his surgical scrubs but with his mask removed. Both women froze, searching his expression for clues. "The surgery was successful," he announced, his professional composure warming with genuine relief. "We replaced the damaged valve and repaired the weakened arterial wall. Professor Chen's heart is already showing improved function. He's being moved to recovery now." The cascade of emotions, relief, gratitude, lingering fear, nearly overwhelmed Mei Lin. She found herself thanking the doctor in a mixture of English and Mandarin, her usual linguistic precision abandoned in the rush of feeling. "When can we see him?" her mother asked, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "He'll be in intensive care for the next 24 hours. You can see him briefly once he's settled." Dr. Lin turned to Mei Lin. "Your father is a fighter. Before the anesthesia, he made me promise to tell you he expects to be discussing interest rate fluctuations with you by next week." Mei Lin laughed through her tears at this quintessential example of her father's priorities. Even facing major surgery, his intellectual curiosity remained undimmed. When they were finally allowed into the ICU, her father appeared smaller than she had ever seen him, surrounded by monitoring equipment, tubes, and wires. But when he briefly opened his eyes and recognized them, the essential spark that made him Chen Liang was unmistakably present. He couldn't speak around the breathing tube, but he squeezed Mei Lin's hand with surprising strength. "Rest now, Baba," she whispered, bending to kiss his forehead. "The hard part is over." Later, while her mother remained at the hospital, Mei Lin returned to her childhood home to shower and change. She sent Ethan a detailed update, including Dr. Lin's prognosis for recovery. His response came immediately, not just expressions of relief, but practical information about post-operative cardiac care programs, rehabilitation options, and specialists in both Beijing and New York who could oversee her father's long-term recovery. The thoroughness of his research touched her deeply. This wasn't perfunctory concern from a distant employer. This was the focused attention of someone who understood who mattered to her. The call she had been half expecting came that evening as she prepared to return to the hospital for the night shift of their bedside vigil. "How are you holding up?" Ethan asked, his face on the video call showing signs of sleeplessness despite the early hour in New York. "Better now that the surgery is behind us," she admitted. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic." "And you? When did you last sleep properly?" She smiled ruefully. "I can't remember, but I'm fine, truly." "You don't have to be fine all the time, Mei Lin." His voice was gentle but firm. "Not with me." Something in his tone, the simple permission to be vulnerable, cracked the composure she had maintained throughout the ordeal. Suddenly, she was telling him everything: her terror during the surgery, the guilt she still carried for leaving China, her fear that even with the operation's success, she might lose her brilliant father to the slow diminishment of age and illness. Ethan listened without interruption, his steady presence on the screen anchoring her as she finally released the emotions she had carefully contained for her mother's sake. When she finally fell silent, emotionally spent but somehow lighter, he spoke with quiet conviction. "Your father is fortunate to have a daughter who loves him so fiercely. And the world is fortunate that you're in it, Mei Lin Chen, with your brilliant mind and your compassionate heart." She brushed away fresh tears, embarrassed by her uncharacteristic emotional display. "I'm sorry. You didn't call to hear all this." "Actually, I did," Ethan countered. "But I also have some news that might interest you professionally. The Chinese Regulatory Commission has unexpectedly accelerated the approval process for our joint venture. The timeline we established has been compressed by nearly 6 months." Mei Lin straightened, her analytical mind immediately engaging with this development. "That's unusual. What changed? We're not entirely sure. The official explanation cites administrative streamlining, but our local contacts suggest there's more to it. We need someone who understands both the official and unofficial channels of Chinese bureaucracy. He paused meaningfully. Someone exactly like you. She understood immediately what he was suggesting. You want me to stay in Beijing longer than planned. It would be incredibly valuable to have you on the ground there. You could liaison with our local team, meet with regulatory officials, perhaps even initiate preliminary negotiations with our potential partners. His expression remained carefully neutral, but she detected an undercurrent of something more personal in his proposal. Of course, this would also allow you to remain with your father during the critical early recovery period. The opportunity was tantalizing on multiple levels. Professionally, it was a chance to fully utilize her expertise in a high-stakes business expansion. Personally, it meant precious additional weeks with her father and mother, healing the distance that had grown during her absence. And then there was Ethan himself, the unspoken dimension of his suggestion. Remaining in Beijing would extend their physical separation, yet she sensed that he was offering her this opportunity not despite his feelings, but because of them. He was prioritizing what she needed above what he might want. I would need official documentation, she said, her mind already calculating logistics. My current visa situation is complicated. Already in progress, Ethan replied with a slight smile. Our legal team prepared the paperwork as soon as the regulatory change was announced. They're quite efficient when properly motivated. And the cleaning service? The mundane question felt almost absurd given the circumstances, yet it represented a practical reality of her divided existence. Officially, you're on extended medical family leave. Unofficially, we've arranged for your position to be held indefinitely. Your apartment lease has been paid through the end of the year. He anticipated her protest with a raised hand. Consider it an advance against future consulting fees. Everything is documented as a business expense. Mei Lin recognized the care he had taken to maintain both her dignity and her independence. He had created an opportunity without making her beholden, a distinction many powerful men failed to understand. Thank you, she said simply, for all of it. Don't thank me yet, he replied with a rueful smile. Wait until you've met with Director Zhang at the Regulatory Commission. He's notorious for testing foreign consultants with obscure policy questions. I'm not a foreign consultant, she reminded him, a new confidence in her voice. I'm a daughter of Beijing who happens to understand Western business practices. His eyes warmed with admiration. Exactly why you're perfect for this. The next 3 weeks transformed Mei Lin's existence yet again. Her days were divided between the hospital, where her father made steady progress toward recovery, and the gleaming offices of Davidson Enterprises' Beijing headquarters, where she rapidly established herself as an invaluable bridge between cultures. The Davidson executives initially regarded her with thinly veiled skepticism. This unknown woman who appeared from nowhere with the apparent backing of the CEO's son. But her first meeting with regulatory officials dispelled any doubts. She navigated the complex dance of formal protocol and informal relationship building with natural ease, shifting between deferential respect and confident assertion as the situation required. When Director Zhang did indeed challenge her with an obscure question about provincial implementation of national foreign investment policies, her detailed response, citing both the official guidelines and the unwritten exceptions, earned her a rare nod of approval from the notoriously difficult official. Most impressive, Ms. Chen, he remarked as they concluded the meeting. It is refreshing to encounter someone who truly understands both perspectives. Your father taught you well. The mention of her father startled her. You knew Professor Chen? His economic theories on adaptive regulatory frameworks informed many of our current policies. Director Zhang's typically stern expression softened slightly. Please convey my respects and wishes for his swift recovery. The connection reminded Mei Lin of the complex web of relationships that defined Chinese business and political spheres. relationships that no foreign company, however wealthy or powerful, could navigate without a guide who understood their nuances. By the time her father was discharged from the hospital to continue his recovery at home, Mei Lin had become essential to Davidson's Beijing operations. She conducted meetings, reviewed contracts, and advised on negotiation strategies with an authority that grew more natural with each passing day. The junior analyst who had once pushed a cleaning cart through empty offices had vanished completely, replaced by a confident executive whose insights were increasingly sought by both sides of the developing partnership. Throughout these professional transformations, Ethan remained a constant presence despite the physical distance. Their daily video calls continued, evolving from status updates to wide-ranging conversations that often extended late into her night and early into his morning. They discussed business strategy, cultural differences, books they were reading, and increasingly, more personal hopes and fears. "Sometimes I wonder if my father ever truly sees me," Ethan confessed during one such call after describing a particularly difficult board meeting, "or if he only sees the continuation of his legacy." "Parents often struggle to separate their children from their aspirations for them," Mei Lin replied, thinking of her own father's academic expectations. "It doesn't mean the love isn't real." "Speaking of parents," Ethan segued, "how is your father's recovery progressing?" "Better than expected. He's already arguing with his physical therapist about the intellectual value of walking versus reading." She smiled fondly. "Some things never change." "And your mother? How is she handling everything?" The question was typical of Ethan's thoughtfulness, remembering that caregivers needed care themselves. "She's exhausted but relieved. Having me here has helped. She can actually sleep through the night now without checking on him constantly." Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And what about you, Mei Lin? Is this arrangement working for you? Being back in Beijing, using your skills openly?" She considered the question seriously. "It feels right, like I'm finally living as my complete self instead of fragments." She hesitated, then added softly, "Thank you for making that possible." "You made it possible," he corrected gently. "I just removed some obstacles." The distinction was important to them both, acknowledging his assistance without diminishing her agency. It was this consistent respect, more than any grand gesture, that had gradually transformed Mei Lin's cautious gratitude into something deeper and more complex. Yet as her time in Beijing extended from weeks into a month, she found herself increasingly wondering what would happen when she eventually returned to New York. Would the connection they had built across oceans translate to their daily lives? Or would the realities of their vastly different positions reassert themselves? These questions remained unspoken during their calls, hovering in the comfortable silences between conversations, in the lingering glances before they disconnected. For now, the distance allowed them to develop a relationship unburdened by physical complications or workplace politics, but eventually Mei Lin knew they would have to navigate the real world together, with all its messy power dynamics and practical considerations. For now, though, she focused on the immediate challenges: her father's recovery, the complex negotiations she was facilitating, and the gradual reconstruction of her professional identity. The future, with all its uncertainties and possibilities, would arrive soon enough. 2 months after her father's surgery, Mei Lin stood at the window of her childhood bedroom, watching the early autumn sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of their apartment complex. The ancient ginkgo tree that had been her childhood climbing spot was beginning to show hints of gold at its edges, a reminder that seasons changed, life moved forward, and it was nearly time for her to return to New York. Her father's recovery had progressed remarkably well. The man who had once struggled to cross a room without becoming winded now took daily walks around the neighborhood, his pace slow but steady, his color healthier than it had been in years. Dr. Lin had declared him a model patient during yesterday's follow-up appointment, praising both his physical improvement and his disciplined adherence to the rehabilitation program. "Your father will need ongoing monitoring," Dr. Lin had told her privately. But there's no medical reason you can't return to your life in America now. We'll take good care of him here. Her life in America. The phrase struck Mei Lin as strangely inadequate to describe what awaited her. The cleaning job that had been her daily reality for months was now officially terminated. She had submitted her resignation by email last week, receiving a surprisingly warm response from the supervisor who had barely acknowledged her existence before. In its place stood a formal offer from Davidson Enterprises, Director of Asia-Pacific Market Integration, a position created specifically to utilize her unique expertise. The transformation extended beyond her professional status. Her belongings had been moved from the cramped Queens apartment she had shared with roommates to a company-leased residence in Manhattan, closer to Davidson headquarters. Her student loans, the financial burden that had partially necessitated her acceptance of menial work, had been mysteriously restructured through a foundation that provided debt relief to promising international professionals. Though Ethan denied direct involvement, she recognized his fingerprints on these arrangements, each one carefully designed to remove obstacles without undermining her independence. Most significantly, her relationship with Ethan himself had evolved during their 2 months of separation. Daily video calls had deepened into a connection that transcended professional collaboration or even friendship. They had developed their own language of inside jokes and shared references, could anticipate each other's thoughts in meetings, and had slowly revealed vulnerabilities they kept hidden from others. The physical distance had created a space for emotional intimacy to flourish, unhurried by the complications of proximity. Now that distance was about to close. Tomorrow she would board a flight to New York, arriving not as an invisible cleaner but as a valued executive, not as a desperate immigrant taking any available work, but as a professional returning to claim her rightful place. And she would see Ethan in person for the first time since that fateful night at Golden Dynasty, when her father's health crisis had sent her rushing back to Beijing. The thought simultaneously thrilled and terrified her. A soft knock at her door interrupted her reflections. Her father entered, moving more slowly than in his prime but with increasing strength each day. "Packing going well?" he asked, glancing at the half-filled suitcase on her bed. "Almost finished," she replied. "I'm traveling lighter than when I came. Some things I won't need anymore." He nodded, understanding her reference to the humble clothes and diminished expectations she had carried to America originally. "Your mother is making all your favorites for dinner. A proper send-off." "I'll miss her cooking in New York," Mei Lin said, suddenly emotional at the thought of leaving again. Her father settled himself in the desk chair, regarding her thoughtfully. "This time is different, though. You're not fleeing to survive. You're returning to thrive." "Yes," she acknowledged. "Everything has changed." "Not everything." He reached for her hand. "Your mother and I are still here waiting for your calls, proud of who you've become. That remains constant." Mei Lin squeezed his hand gently. "I'm leaving you in much better circumstances than before. And we're sending you back in much better circumstances." He smiled. "This Davidson position, it utilizes your education properly?" "More than properly. It's challenging, respected, and well compensated." She hesitated. "Baba, I want you to know that I didn't accept this role because of any personal considerations. It's a legitimate opportunity that I'm qualified for." Her father's eyes twinkled with familiar perceptiveness. "The personal and professional can coexist without diminishing either, my phoenix. I've researched this young man thoroughly, you know." This surprised her. "You've researched Ethan?" "Of course. Did you think I would entrust my daughter's future to someone I hadn't investigated?" He chuckled at her expression. "I may be recovering from heart surgery, but my mind and my contacts remain intact. Ethan Davidson has an excellent reputation, innovative business strategies, ethical leadership practices, genuine commitment to corporate responsibility." "And this is your blessing?" Mei Lin asked, both amused and touched by her father's protective instincts. "My blessing is for you to follow your heart while using your head," he replied, suddenly serious. The man clearly respects your intelligence and values your perspective. That's a solid foundation, whether for professional collaboration or something more. After her father left, Mei Lin returned to her packing with renewed focus. She carefully selected items that represented her true self, books that had shaped her thinking, a jade pendant that had belonged to her grandmother, photos of her parents. But she also made deliberate space for new possibilities, leaving room in her luggage and her life for what awaited her in New York. Her final dinner at home was a bittersweet celebration. Her mother had indeed prepared all her childhood favorites: dumplings filled with pork and chives, spicy Sichuan eggplant, crispy duck with scallion pancakes. They ate leisurely, reminiscing about family vacations and school achievements, carefully avoiding the melancholy of another goodbye lurking at the edges of their conversation. After dinner, as her mother cleared the dishes, her father presented her with a small wooden box. "A returning gift," he explained as she opened it. Inside lay his prized fountain pen, the one he had used to sign all his academic papers, the symbol of his scholarly identity. "Baba, I can't take this," she protested. "You've had it since your first teaching position. And now its journey continues with you." He closed her fingers around the pen. "Use it to sign your own important papers. Build your own legacy." The simple gesture, passing an instrument of achievement from one generation to the next, moved her deeply. It represented not just his blessing but his confidence that she would create a future worthy of their shared sacrifices. Later that night, after her parents had gone to bed, she made her final video call to Ethan from Beijing. "All packed?" he asked, his face slightly pixelated but his smile clear. "Almost. Just a few last-minute things tomorrow morning." She angled the camera to show her nearly empty room. "It feels strange, dismantling my childhood space again." "This time you're not running toward uncertainty," he reminded her, echoing her father's earlier sentiment. "No, but there are still unknowns." She gathered her courage to address what they had both been carefully avoiding. "Ethan, when I arrive, things will be different between us." His expression grew serious. "Different how?" "We've built this connection across oceans, through screens. It's been insulated from reality in some ways. No office politics, no daily frictions, no physical complications." She searched for the right words. "I'm concerned that once I'm back, once I'm your employee officially, the dynamics will shift." "You're not my employee, Mei Lin," he corrected gently. "You're a Davidson Enterprises executive who happens to collaborate with me on the Asia expansion. Your position reports to the International Division VP, not to me. I made sure of that specifically to avoid any power imbalance." The thoughtfulness of this arrangement, another example of his careful consideration of her position, touched her. Still, concerns lingered. "It's not just the reporting structure," she persisted. "It's everything. People will talk. They'll assume I got the position because of personal reasons." "Let them talk," Ethan said with unexpected firmness. "You earned this role through your exceptional work. Anyone who spends 5 minutes in a meeting with you will understand that. And frankly, anyone who can't recognize your value isn't worth worrying about." His confidence bolstered her, as it had so many times during their long-distance collaboration. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," he admitted, "but it is clear. You belong in this role. Full stop. Whatever else develops between us, and I hope something does, that professional truth remains unchanged." The conversation shifted to logistics, her flight details, the car that would meet her at JFK, the orientation schedule for her first official week. But beneath the practical planning ran a current of anticipation, of possibilities hovering just beyond the horizon. "I'll see you tomorrow, then," she said finally, the reality of their imminent reunion suddenly overwhelming. "Tomorrow," he confirmed, his eyes conveying what words had not yet fully expressed. Safe travels, Mei Lin. The following day passed in a blur of last-minute preparations, tearful goodbyes, and her mother's final attempts to send her off with enough home-cooked food to feed a small army. By the time she settled into her business-class seat, another unfamiliar luxury, Mei Lin felt emotionally drained yet strangely energized. As the plane lifted off from Beijing Capital International Airport, she watched the city of her birth recede, the ancient hutongs and modern skyscrapers blending into an indistinct tapestry below. Unlike her first departure, heavy with desperation and uncertainty, this journey felt like a choice, a step forward rather than an escape. 14 hours later, the Manhattan skyline appeared through her window, glittering in the early evening light. The familiar spires of the Empire State and Chrysler buildings welcomed her back to her adopted city, now transformed from a place of struggle to one of opportunity. Customs was expedited with her new business visa. When she emerged into the arrival hall, her eyes scanned the crowd automatically, though she expected only the driver Ethan had mentioned. Instead, she saw him, standing slightly apart from the waiting families and hired car services, his tall figure unmistakable. He hadn't mentioned he would come personally. For a moment, she froze, suddenly conscious of her travel-rumpled appearance and the emotional vulnerability of this reunion. Their eyes met across the crowded terminal. Ethan's face brightened with a smile that transformed his normally composed features, revealing the depth of feeling he had carefully modulated during their video calls. He moved toward her with purposeful strides, closing the physical distance that had defined their relationship for months. When he reached her, he seemed momentarily uncertain, corporate protocol warring with personal desire. Then, with a decisiveness that characterized his best business decisions, he embraced her. "Welcome home, Mei Lin," he said softly, his voice warm against her ear. And in that moment, despite the lingering questions and challenges that awaited them, Mei Lin knew that she had indeed found home, not in Beijing or New York, but in the space where she could finally be fully herself, valued for her mind, respected for her strength, and cherished for her heart. Mei Lin's first week at Davidson Enterprises as Director of Asia-Pacific Market Integration was a study in contrasts. The same elevators that had carried her and her cleaning cart now whisked her to the executive floor. The conference rooms where she had once emptied waste paper baskets now hosted meetings she led. The executives who had previously looked through her now leaned forward attentively as she presented market analyses. The cognitive dissonance was jarring. Sometimes walking through the familiar corridors in her tailored suits, she would catch a glimpse of the cleaning staff, heads lowered, moving efficiently along the edges of rooms, and experience a momentary dislocation, as if seeing a ghost of her former self. Ethan had arranged a thoughtful onboarding process, introducing her to key team members individually before her first group meetings. His careful planning gave her space to establish her own professional identity separate from their personal connection. During these introductions, he maintained a warm but appropriately professional demeanor, referring to her academic background and the excellent work she had done in Beijing without any hint of their deeper relationship. Most colleagues welcomed her with polite curiosity. Her unusual path to the executive suite remained undisclosed, with her official biography mentioning only her education at Beijing University and her recent work facilitating Davidson's regulatory approvals in China. If anyone recognized her from her cleaning days, they kept it to themselves. Not everyone was enthusiastic about her arrival, however. Marcus Whitley, the senior VP of International Operations to whom she formally reported, received her with thinly veiled skepticism. A 20-year Davidson veteran who had worked his way up through conventional channels, Marcus clearly viewed her rapid ascension with suspicion. "So you're the China wunderkind Ethan discovered," he remarked during their first one-on-one meeting, the emphasis suggesting doubts about her qualifications. "Quite the meteoric rise. I'm looking forward to contributing to the team," Mei Lin replied evenly, refusing to be baited into defensiveness. The Asia-Pacific expansion presents significant opportunities if navigated properly. Indeed, his smile didn't reach his eyes. Though some of us have been developing these markets for years before your arrival. The implied territorial warning was clear. Marcus viewed her as an interloper, possibly a temporary fascination of the CEO's son rather than a serious professional addition to the leadership team. Rather than confront this skepticism directly, Mei Lin chose to let her work speak for itself. During the division's strategy meeting later that week, she listened more than she spoke, carefully noting the team dynamics and existing assumptions about Chinese markets. When Marcus presented projections that relied on outdated regulatory frameworks, she waited for an appropriate opening. "Those are interesting forecasts," she observed when he finished. "May I offer a complementary perspective?" Without waiting for his response, she outlined recent policy shifts that would significantly impact their timeline, supporting her analysis with specific references to provincial implementation variances that even their Beijing office had overlooked. Her presentation was concise, authoritative, and diplomatically framed as enhancing rather than contradicting Marcus's work. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then another executive, Diane from legal, began asking follow-up questions that indicated she grasped the significance of Mei Lin's insights. Others joined in, the conversation shifting from polite inclusion of the newcomer to genuine engagement with her expertise. Marcus sat back, his expression unreadable, but his subsequent revision of the quarterly projections incorporated several of her key points, a reluctant acknowledgement of her value. Ethan, who had observed the exchange without intervening, caught her eye briefly across the conference table. The flash of pride in his gaze warmed her, but she maintained her professional composure, already understanding that her success here would depend on being recognized for her own merits, not her connection to him. Outside of work, they moved cautiously into this new phase of their relationship. Their first proper date in New York was at a small jazz club in the village, neutral territory far from the corporate headquarters and the eyes of colleagues. "You were impressive in the strategy meeting today," Ethan said as they settled at a small table near the stage. "Marcus doesn't adjust his projections for just anyone." "He didn't have much choice once Diane and the others engaged with the analysis," Mei Lin replied. "I was careful not to challenge him directly." "I noticed. Very strategic." Ethan's admiration was evident. "Most new executives would have tried to establish dominance immediately. Your approach was much more effective. In China, we learn that the most enduring influence often comes from appearing to defer while subtly redirecting," she said with a small smile. "Direct confrontation rarely yields optimal results." The jazz quartet began their first set, the soulful saxophone providing a backdrop to their conversation, which drifted from work to more personal territories. They discovered shared tastes in music and film, debated the merits of different translations of classical Chinese poetry, and exchanged stories of childhood mishaps and triumphs. What struck Mei Lin most was the easy flow between them, how their intellectual connection, built over months of long-distance collaboration, translated seamlessly to this more intimate setting. Ethan was as engaged discussing economic policy as he was describing his disastrous first attempt at cooking as a college student. His genuine interest in her thoughts, whether on business strategy or favorite desserts, made her feel truly seen in a way few people ever had. As the evening progressed, the careful distance they maintained at the office gradually dissolved. When Ethan reached across the table to take her hand during a particularly moving musical passage, the simple contact felt both electric and natural, as if their physical connection was merely catching up to what their minds and hearts had already established. Later, as they walked along the moonlit paths of Washington Square Park, Ethan broached the subject they had been circling all evening. "We should probably discuss how we want to handle this at work," he said, gesturing between them. "Professionally," Mei Lin replied immediately. "I need to establish myself on my own merits, not as Ethan's girlfriend," he supplied when she hesitated. The term simultaneously thrilled and unsettled her. Is that what I am? He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. I'd like you to be, but I understand your concerns about perception and timing. It's not just perception, she explained. I've worked too hard to be reduced to a relationship status, and you've created this opportunity for me to use my abilities fully. I don't want to undermine that by confirming the suspicions some already have. Like Marcus, Ethan nodded, understanding. So we maintain professional boundaries at work. For now, she agreed, until I've proven myself beyond any doubt. And outside of work? His eyes held hers, the question encompassing far more than their public status. Mei Lin considered her answer carefully. The cautious part of her that had survived by keeping her head down, by not taking risks, urged restraint. But the part of her that her father had reminded her to reclaim, the bold, brilliant woman who had once fearlessly pursued her ambitions, wanted more. Outside of work, she said finally, I'd like to explore where this could go, without rushing, but without artificial barriers either. His smile was worth any risk. I've waited months to hear you say something like that. When he kissed her beneath the arch in Washington Square Park, it felt like the culmination of a journey that had begun the moment he heard her speaking Mandarin in his father's office. A journey from invisibility to recognition, from survival to possibility. The following weeks established a rhythm to their dual relationship. At Davidson Enterprises, they maintained a scrupulously professional dynamic, collaborating effectively but without special familiarity, participating in meetings as respected colleagues rather than as a couple. Mei Lin gradually won over even skeptical team members like Marcus with her consistently excellent work and diplomatic approach to office politics. After hours and on weekends, they explored New York together, sometimes revisiting Ethan's favorite haunts, sometimes discovering places new to both of them. Mei Lin introduced him to authentic regional Chinese cuisines in Flushing. He took her to obscure bookshops specializing in first editions. They attended symphony performances and street festivals with equal enthusiasm, each experience deepening their connection. The careful separation of their professional and personal lives worked well, until the announcement of Robert Davidson's impending retirement sent ripples through the company. The elder Davidson had been gradually reducing his involvement in day-to-day operations for years, but his formal stepping down as CEO accelerated succession plans that most executives had assumed were still years away. Suddenly, Ethan's role changed from innovative director of international expansion to CEO in waiting, with all the increased scrutiny such a position entailed. The board wants to announce the transition at the annual shareholders meeting next month, Ethan explained during a rare lunch meeting in his office, the door firmly closed for privacy. Father will remain as chairman, but I'll assume full CEO responsibilities effective immediately afterward. Mei Lin absorbed this news, immediately understanding its implications for both of them. Congratulations, she said sincerely. You're ready for this. Am I? For a brief moment, his confident facade slipped, revealing the weight of the responsibility he was about to assume. 5,000 employees worldwide, shareholders demanding continued growth, competitors waiting for any misstep. You've been preparing for this your entire life, she reminded him gently. Not just through your education and experience, but through who you are, how you think, how you care about the impact of your decisions. He gave her a grateful smile, then his expression grew more serious. There's something else we need to discuss. The transition team has raised concerns about us. Mei Lin felt a chill. What kind of concerns? The usual corporate governance issues, potential conflicts of interest, appearance of favoritism, that sort of thing. He sounded frustrated. It's ridiculous, of course. Your position isn't even in my direct reporting line. But as CEO, ultimately everyone reports to you, she pointed out pragmatically. Technically, yes. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. They've suggested that we either formalize our relationship with full disclosure to the board and implementation of appropriate corporate safeguards or end it, she finished when he hesitated. Which is not an option I'm willing to consider, Ethan stated firmly. Mei Lin felt the familiar pressure of circumstances forcing difficult choices, the same pressure that had once pushed her to abandon her education and take work beneath her abilities. But this time, she refused to let external forces dictate her path. "What do you propose?" she asked, her analytical mind already considering alternatives. "Transparency with appropriate boundaries," he replied. "We disclose our relationship to the board. You continue reporting to Marcus, with additional oversight from the governance committee for any decisions that might create the appearance of conflict. It's a standard corporate approach for these situations. And if Marcus or others use this to undermine my position, to suggest I'm only there because of my relationship with you, then they'll be challenging the judgment of both the current and future CEO," Ethan said with quiet confidence. "Besides, your work speaks for itself. The Guangzhou partnership alone has already exceeded projected returns by 15%. Mei Lin considered his proposal, weighing professional risk against personal cost. 6 months ago, she might have chosen the safer path, prioritizing job security over emotional fulfillment. But her father's words echoed in her memory. "You're not leaving to survive. You're returning to thrive." "All right," she agreed finally. "Transparency with appropriate boundaries. But I want to be involved in drafting the disclosure and reviewing the safeguards. This affects my career too." "Absolutely." Ethan's relief was evident. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As she returned to her office afterward, Mei Lin reflected on how much had changed since she first arrived in America. The woman who had once hidden her education and abilities, who had made herself small and invisible to survive, was now helping shape corporate governance policies to accommodate her relationship with the incoming CEO. The cleaning lady had not only stepped out of the shadows, she had claimed her rightful place in the light, refusing to diminish any part of herself to fit others' expectations. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them as her complete self. Brilliant mind, compassionate heart, and newfound courage to claim the life she deserved. The shareholders' meeting where Robert Davidson would officially announce his retirement and Ethan's succession was scheduled at the Grand Ballroom of the Pierre, a suitably prestigious venue for a corporate transition of this magnitude. As the day approached, Mei Lin found herself in an unexpected position, helping Ethan prepare for what would be the most significant public appearance of his career, while simultaneously finalizing the formal disclosure of their relationship to the board of directors. "The Asian market expansion projections need to be more prominent in the presentation," she advised during a late-night strategy session in Ethan's apartment. Spreadsheets and reports covered his dining table, their dinner plates long since pushed aside. "It's your signature achievement and demonstrates your global vision for the company." "Agreed," Ethan said, making notes. "Though father thinks I should emphasize the domestic manufacturing investments more. American jobs always plays well with certain board members." "Both are important," Mei Lin acknowledged, "but the international growth is what differentiates your leadership from your father's. It tells a story about Davidson Enterprises' future, not just its past." Ethan looked up from his notes, studying her with appreciation. "You understand the narrative dimensions of business in a way most financial analysts never grasp. That's what makes your insights so valuable." The compliment warmed her, both professionally and personally. Over the past weeks, they had refined their ability to shift between roles, advisors, colleagues, and partners, sometimes within the same conversation. The boundaries remained clear but no longer felt like walls. Rather, they were permeable membranes allowing them to access different aspects of their connection as circumstances required. "Speaking of narratives," she said, gathering her courage, "we should discuss how the relationship disclosure might affect the succession announcement." Ethan set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "The timing isn't ideal, I know. The business press will inevitably connect the dots once the relationship disclosure becomes public knowledge," Mei Lin continued. "They'll scrutinize my background, my qualifications. Your qualifications are impeccable, Ethan interjected. On paper, yes, but my unusual career path. She hesitated, then voiced the concern she'd been carrying. What if they discover I was working as a cleaner just months ago? That could create exactly the kind of distraction you don't need during your transition to CEO. Ethan's expression softened. First, I'm not ashamed of how we met or your journey. Second, your rapid rise says more about your exceptional abilities than any conventional career path could. He reached across the table to take her hand. But I understand your concerns about timing and optics. I've been thinking about this, Mei Lin said carefully. What if we delay the formal disclosure until after your first quarter as CEO? You'll have established your leadership, implemented some of your strategic initiatives. No, Ethan said firmly. I'm starting my tenure as CEO with complete transparency. Hiding our relationship even temporarily sends the wrong message about my leadership values and creates unnecessary complications later. His unwavering ethical stance, placing principle above expediency even when it created personal and professional challenges, was one of the qualities Mei Lin most admired about him. Still, her protective instincts were strong. I don't want to be a liability to you, she said softly. You're not a liability, Mei Lin. You're one of my greatest assets, professionally and personally. He squeezed her hand. We'll navigate this together, openly and honestly. The board already knows we're drafting the disclosure. The press will find it far less interesting than we fear. And anyone who attempts to use our relationship to undermine either of us will only reveal their own lack of substance. His confidence bolstered hers, as it had so many times since they'd met. Then we proceed as planned. Disclosure to the board this week, appropriate corporate governance measures in place before the succession announcement. Exactly. He smiled, transitioning back to their earlier topic. Now, about those Asian market projections, let's make sure the growth curve reflects the accelerated timeline you negotiated with the Regulatory Commission. They worked late into the night, refining the presentation that would introduce Ethan Davidson as the new leader of a global enterprise. When they finally cleared the dining table of documents, both were satisfied with the narrative they had crafted, one that honored the company's history while boldly articulating its future direction. As they prepared for bed, Mei Lin found herself reflecting on how completely their lives had intertwined in such a short time. 3 months ago, she had been emptying Ethan's trash can while he remained oblivious to her existence. Now she was helping shape his vision for a company valued at billions. More remarkably, they had built a relationship that somehow transcended these extremes, one based on mutual respect, shared intellectual passion, and a deepening emotional connection that neither had anticipated but both now cherished. The relationship disclosure to the board proceeded more smoothly than Mei Lin had feared. The carefully drafted document, reviewed by both corporate counsel and an independent ethics consultant, outlined their relationship status, the reporting structures that ensured appropriate oversight, and the recusal protocols for any decisions involving potential conflicts of interest. Most board members received the information with professional equanimity. A few older members exchanged knowing glances that suggested they viewed the situation as a predictable case of the boss's son becoming involved with an attractive subordinate, an assumption that irritated Mei Lin, but which she knew would dissolve once they worked with her directly. Only one board member, Victoria Chambers, sought Mei Lin out privately after the meeting. I wanted to share something with you, the elegant older woman said, drawing Mei Lin aside. When I joined this board 15 years ago, I was the only woman in the room. Robert Davidson caught considerable flack for appointing me. Accusations of tokenism, questions about my qualifications despite my Harvard MBA and successful tenure as CFO at Westlake Industries. Mei Lin listened, curious about the purpose of this confidence. What I learned, Victoria continued, is that in environments like this, exceptional women will always face questions about how they achieved their positions. The only effective response is to be so extraordinarily good at what you do that the questions become irrelevant. Her eyes held Mei Lin's with understanding born of shared experience. From what I've observed of your work on the China expansion, you're well on your way to that standard. The unexpected alliance with such a respected board member buoyed Mei Lin's confidence as the day of the shareholders' meeting approached. Victoria's implicit endorsement suggested that at least some of the company's leadership recognized her value independent of her relationship with Ethan. The morning of the announcement dawned clear and crisp, a perfect October day in New York. Mei Lin dressed with particular care in a tailored charcoal suit with subtle jade accents, professional but with a touch of her cultural heritage. She would be attending as part of the executive team, seated with other division directors, deliberately separate from Ethan to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. The grand ballroom was already filling with shareholders, business press, and industry analysts when she arrived. The atmosphere hummed with anticipation. Robert Davidson's retirement had been rumored for years, but never confirmed until now. Succession at one of America's most successful corporations was business news of the highest order. Mei Lin took her assigned seat, exchanging professional greetings with colleagues while scanning the room. She spotted Marcus Whitley near the front, deep in conversation with board members. Though their working relationship remained formal, he had gradually shifted from outright skepticism to grudging respect for her capabilities, particularly after her analysis of supply chain vulnerabilities had prevented a potentially costly disruption in their Southeast Asian operations. Robert Davidson took the stage precisely on schedule, his commanding presence immediately drawing the room's attention. At 68, he remained an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered like his son, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. 35 years ago, he began without preamble, I took the reins of a regional manufacturing company with solid fundamentals but limited horizons. Today, Davidson Enterprises spans 5 continents, employs over 5,000 people, and continues to deliver exceptional value to both our customers and our shareholders. He detailed the company's growth under his leadership, emphasizing key strategic decisions that had transformed the business from a domestic manufacturer to a global enterprise. His delivery was masterful, confident without arrogance, proud yet acknowledging the contributions of others. Leadership transitions are defining moments for any organization, he continued, his voice taking on a more personal tone. The choice of successor shapes not just the immediate future but the company's legacy for generations. It is therefore with complete confidence and immense pride that I announce Ethan Davidson as the next Chief Executive Officer of Davidson Enterprises, effective immediately. Applause filled the ballroom as Ethan rose from his front row seat and joined his father on stage. The physical resemblance between them was striking, yet Mei Lin noted the subtle differences in their demeanor, Robert projecting authority and certainty, Ethan conveying thoughtful determination and visionary purpose. Father and son shook hands formally before Robert stepped aside, symbolically ceding the podium and the authority it represented. As Ethan moved to address the assembly for the first time as CEO, his eyes briefly found Mei Lin's in the audience. The moment was fleeting but significant, a private acknowledgement in the midst of this most public transition. Thank you, Father, for your extraordinary leadership and for the foundation you've built, Ethan began, his voice steady and assured. Davidson Enterprises thrives today because of your vision, persistence, and unwavering commitment to excellence. He then shifted smoothly into outlining his vision for the company's future, expanding global reach while deepening community commitments, embracing technological innovation while honoring manufacturing traditions, pursuing profit with purpose. The presentation they had refined together flowed naturally, his delivery confident without seeming rehearsed. When he highlighted the Asia-Pacific expansion, projecting market growth figures that exceeded industry expectations, Mei Lin felt a quiet pride. These were the results of their collaborative work, of strategies she had helped shape and relationships she had helped build. Her contribution was evident in the substance, if not explicitly acknowledged in the presentation. As Ethan concluded to enthusiastic applause, Mei Lin observed the reactions around the room. Shareholders appeared reassured by the smooth transition and excited by the growth projections. Board members nodded with approval. Even the business press seemed impressed by the young CEO's command of both details and vision. The formal portion of the event transitioned into a reception, where Ethan was immediately surrounded by well-wishers, board members, major shareholders, business partners eager to establish rapport with the new CEO. Mei Lin deliberately maintained her distance, engaging in professional conversations with colleagues and responding to questions about the Asian markets from interested analysts. She was discussing regional regulatory variations with a Bloomberg reporter when she sensed a presence behind her. Turning, she found herself face to face with Robert Davidson for the first time since her days as part of the cleaning staff, when he had looked through her as if she were invisible. "Ms. Chen," he said with a slight nod, "I understand you've been instrumental in our Guangzhou negotiations." "It's been a collaborative effort, Mr. Davidson," she replied, maintaining her professional composure despite her surprise at being singled out. "My son speaks highly of your insights." His piercing blue eyes, so like Ethan's yet somehow colder, assessed her with frank curiosity. "He credits your cultural knowledge with saving us from several potential missteps." "The Chinese market presents unique challenges for Western companies," she acknowledged. "Local perspective can be valuable in navigating them." Robert Davidson studied her for a moment longer. "Indeed, though I imagine your perspective extends beyond merely professional matters these days." The implication was clear. He was aware of her relationship with his son. His tone wasn't overtly disapproving, but neither was it welcoming. It contained a hint of calculation, as if he were still determining whether she represented an asset or a liability to the Davidson legacy. Before she could formulate a response that balanced dignity with respect, Ethan appeared at his father's side. "I see you've met Mei Lin," he said, his casual tone belying the protective stance he subtly adopted. "Her work has been transformative for our Asia strategy." "So I've gathered," the elder Davidson replied. "An interesting addition to our executive team." He glanced between them, clearly noting the current beneath their professional interaction. "I look forward to seeing the long-term impact of her contributions." With that ambiguous statement, he excused himself to greet an approaching board member, leaving Mei Lin and Ethan in a momentary bubble of privacy amid the crowded reception. "I'm sorry about that," Ethan said quietly. "Father has always been protective of the company," Mei Lin supplied. "It's understandable. Davidson Enterprises is his life's work." "It's more than that," Ethan sighed. "He measures everything and everyone in terms of value to the corporate mission. It makes him an effective businessman but sometimes a challenging father." He glanced in the direction Robert had gone. "Don't worry about his assessment. He'll recognize your worth eventually, on the merits of your work, not your relationship with me." "I'm not worried," Mei Lin assured him, realizing as she spoke that it was true. Robert Davidson's approval or disapproval no longer held the power to define her worth, professionally or personally. "Your father built an impressive company, but you're building something more meaningful. An enterprise that values not just profit, but people. Not just efficiency, but ethics." Ethan's expression softened. "Sometimes you see me more clearly than I see myself." "That works both ways," she replied with a small smile. "Now go be the CEO. We can talk more later." As he rejoined the corporate reception, seamlessly transitioning back into his public role, Mei Lin reflected on how far they had both come in the months since their first encounter. The cleaning lady and the executive had each transformed, she reclaiming her education and expertise, he stepping fully into his leadership potential. Yet the core of what had drawn them together remained unchanged. Mutual recognition of each other's true selves beneath the roles circumstances had assigned them. 6 months into Ethan's tenure as CEO, Davidson Enterprises held its annual Lunar New Year celebration, an event that had grown from a small cultural acknowledgement to a major corporate gala under his leadership. The company's Manhattan headquarters had been transformed for the evening, its austere modern lobby now adorned with traditional red lanterns, delicate paper cuttings, and elegant calligraphy scrolls. For Mei Lin, the evening represented a meaningful convergence of her worlds. Her parents had arrived from Beijing 3 days earlier, their first visit to America, and would be attending as honored guests. The Davidson Asia-Pacific team she now led had exceeded all performance projections for the quarter, and her relationship with Ethan, initially the subject of corporate whispers and media speculation, had gradually normalized into an accepted reality within the company culture. The initial business press coverage of their relationship had been predictably sensationalized. CEO's cleaning lady turned executive, merit or romance? One particularly tasteless headline had blared, but the story had a surprisingly short shelf life. Ethan's immediate success as CEO, launching several innovative initiatives while maintaining strong financial performance, quickly overshadowed the personal gossip. Mei Lin's own professional accomplishments, particularly her masterful handling of a complex regulatory challenge in Singapore that had stymied competitors for years, further reinforced her legitimate place in the executive suite. Now, as she put the finishing touches on her outfit in her apartment, a modern interpretation of a traditional qipao in deep crimson silk with subtle gold embroidery, Mei Lin reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. "You look beautiful," her mother said from the doorway, already dressed in an elegant black cheongsam with silver threading. "Like a phoenix indeed." "Thank you, Mama," Mei Lin replied, securing a pair of jade earrings that had been her grandmother's. "How is Baba feeling? Ready for a long evening?" "He's been ready since breakfast," her mother laughed. "He's already practicing his English phrases for meeting the famous Mr. Davidson, both of them." In the living room, her father sat reading the Wall Street Journal, his recovery so complete that only the careful way he paced himself on stairs betrayed his recent health crisis. He looked up as Mei Lin entered, his eyes bright with pride. "Ah, my daughter, the finance director," he said in English, deliberately practicing. "Very beautiful, very smart." Mei Lin smiled, once again struck by how differently her life had unfolded than either of them could have imagined when she left China. "Are you nervous about meeting everyone, Baba?" He switched to Mandarin, more comfortable expressing complex thoughts in his native language. "Why should I be nervous? My daughter advises their CEO. I taught at Beijing University for 30 years. We meet as equals." His confidence warmed her heart. Throughout her childhood, he had instilled in her the belief that education and integrity placed one on equal footing with anyone, regardless of wealth or position. To see him maintain that principle even when facing American corporate power was both touching and inspiring. The car Ethan had sent arrived precisely on time, whisking them through Manhattan's glittering evening landscape to the Davidson building. As they approached, Mei Lin pointed out landmarks to her parents, enjoying their wonder at the city she now called home. "This is where you work?" her mother asked as they pulled up to the imposing glass and steel structure, its facade illuminated with red and gold lights for the celebration. "It looks like a palace." "Just a different kind of university," Mei Lin replied, echoing her father's lifelong comparison between education and true worth. "The building is impressive, but it's the ideas inside that matter." Ethan was waiting for them in the private reception area adjacent to the main lobby, away from the early arriving guests. He had been determined that Mei Lin's parents receive a proper welcome, without the awkwardness of navigating a crowded corporate event upon arrival. "Professor Chen, Mrs. Chen," he greeted them in his carefully practiced Mandarin, bowing respectfully. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person." Her father returned the bow with equal formality, then surprised Mei Lin by extending his hand in the Western style. "We have spoken much through screens. Better to meet face to face." As Ethan led them on a private tour of the executive floor before the main celebration, Mei Lin observed the interaction between the two most influential men in her life with a mixture of amusement and affection. Despite the language barrier, they found common ground discussing economic trends, educational philosophies, and even classical literature, Ethan revealing his early love of comparative literature studies that had surprised her months earlier. "Your young man is well educated," her father commented approvingly in Mandarin during a moment when Ethan stepped away to address a catering question, "not just in business matters. He works very hard to understand different perspectives," Mei Lin replied, touched by her father's assessment. "A necessary quality in both leadership and partnership," her mother added with a knowing smile. When they rejoined the main celebration, Mei Lin couldn't help but contrast this entrance with her previous experiences in the building. She had spent months moving invisibly through these same spaces, eyes lowered, presence minimized. Now she walked confidently among corporate leaders and business partners, her parents beside her, her contributions recognized and valued. The evening progressed beautifully. Ethan's welcome speech, incorporating several phrases in perfect Mandarin that drew appreciative murmurs from the Chinese business delegates, set a tone of cultural respect and genuine celebration. The traditional lion dance performance, arranged by Mei Lin, brought authentic festivity to the corporate setting. Even Robert Davidson, initially skeptical of the expanded cultural emphasis, seemed impressed by the enthusiastic response from their international partners. During a quiet moment between formal activities, Mei Lin found herself standing with her father near the windows overlooking the city, both of them taking a brief respite from the social energy of the celebration. "You have built a good life here," he said, gazing at the glittering skyline. "Different than we imagined, but good." "It was difficult at first," she acknowledged. "I felt like I had failed the path you set for me." Her father shook his head firmly. "The path was never the point, my phoenix. The destination, becoming fully yourself, using your gifts, making a difference. That was always the goal." He gestured subtly toward Ethan, who was deep in conversation with some Chinese executives across the room. "And finding someone who values those gifts properly. That is a blessing I did not dare hope for when you left Beijing." Before she could respond, Robert Davidson approached them, his commanding presence drawing attention even in the crowded room. "Professor Chen," he said, extending his hand, "I understand you were quite renowned at Beijing University. Economic theory, wasn't it?" Her father straightened almost imperceptibly, academic to corporate leader. "Adaptive market theory with emphasis on transitional economies," he specified in careful English. "Your son tells me Davidson Enterprises has applied similar principles in your Southeast Asian expansion." "Indeed," Robert acknowledged, looking slightly surprised at the specific reference. "Though I believe that particular strategy came through your daughter's department." Mei Lin has always understood that economic theories must serve practical applications, her father replied with quiet pride. This she learned early. Something in her father's dignified confidence seemed to shift Robert's perceptions subtly. He studied both Chen men with new consideration, as if recalibrating his assessment of the family that had become entwined with his own. "Your daughter has become quite integral to our operations, Professor Chen," he said finally. "Her insights have proven unexpectedly valuable." It was as close to explicit approval as Robert Davidson was likely to offer, yet Mei Lin recognized the significance of the admission. The man who had once looked through her as if she were invisible was now acknowledging her essential contribution to his life's work. Later, as the celebration reached its peak, Ethan found a moment to draw Mei Lin away from the crowd, leading her to the quieter executive terrace with its spectacular view of the city. "Your parents are wonderful," he said, his expression soft in the ambient light. "I see so much of you in both of them, your father's intellectual rigor, your mother's practical wisdom." "They like you too," she replied, leaning against the terrace railing. "Even my father, who scrutinizes every equation with skepticism, sees the genuine person behind the CEO title." "High praise indeed." Ethan moved closer, taking her hand. "Though there's another approval I've been seeking." Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "Oh? I had a private conversation with your father yesterday while you were showing your mother Central Park." His fingers interlaced with hers. A rather traditional conversation as it happens. Mei Lin's breath caught as understanding dawned. "Ethan." He turned to face her fully, his expression a mixture of certainty and vulnerability that she had come to cherish. "When I first heard you speaking Mandarin in my father's office, I knew you were remarkable. What I couldn't have known was how completely you would transform my understanding of what matters, in business and in life." From his pocket he withdrew a small box in deep blue velvet. "Mei Lin Chen, you've crossed oceans and boundaries, shattered expectations, and rebuilt your life multiple times over. Would you consider one more transformation, from extraordinary partner to extraordinary wife?" The ring he revealed was unlike any conventional engagement ring, a perfect jade circle flanked by two small diamonds, representing their different cultural origins coming together in harmony. "You had this custom made," she breathed, recognizing the symbolism immediately. "I wanted it to reflect both worlds, just as we do." His eyes held hers, earnest and hopeful. "Will you marry me, Mei Lin?" In that moment, standing high above the city where she had once scrubbed floors to survive, Mei Lin felt the completion of a circle that had begun the moment Ethan had truly seen her. The journey from invisible to essential, from survival to thriving, from solitary struggle to profound partnership, culminated in this perfect fusion of their separate paths into a shared future. "Yes," she said simply, her voice steady with certainty. "Yes, I will." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the jade cool and smooth against her skin, Mei Lin thought of all the versions of herself that had led to this moment. The brilliant student in Beijing, the desperate daughter taking any work to save her father, the hidden talent finally recognized, the executive confidently claiming her place in the world. Each version had been authentically her, each necessary to the journey. Ethan drew her close, their foreheads touching in an intimate gesture that had become their private ritual. "I love you," he whispered, "all of you, past, present, and future." When they returned to the celebration, her parents noticed the ring immediately. Her mother's eyes filled with happy tears, while her father nodded with solemn approval. Even Robert Davidson, upon being informed, offered a genuine smile, perhaps the first Mei Lin had ever seen from him. "Well," the elder Davidson said, raising his glass in an impromptu toast, "it seems Davidson Enterprises has acquired its most valuable asset yet." Ethan shook his head, his arm around Mei Lin's waist. "Not acquired, father. Partnered with. There's a significant difference." As congratulations flowed around them, Mei Lin caught the eye of Li Ayi, who had been specially invited to cater traditional delicacies for the celebration. The old woman smiled knowingly from across the room, she who had seen the beginning of their story, who had recognized the potential when they themselves were still discovering it. In that moment, surrounded by both her worlds, Chinese and American, past and present, family and future, Mei Lin felt a completion that transcended the extraordinary circumstances of their meeting. The cleaning lady and the executive had found in each other not just recognition of their hidden talents, but the rarest gift of all, being truly seen, deeply valued, and completely loved for exactly who they were. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.